So, can you tell us a little bit more about how you work with trauma in the room?
Well, I've done a lot of different things, a lot of different trainings, but the way I'm working now is I recently did actually I've been working with a year for this brain spotting. I recently did an extensive training on it, which really excited me because of the trainings I've done, this one was the most able to let the client lead me and very easily, very gently just go where the client wanted to go. And it's as simple as someone talking about a particular problem they're having or feeling, and then noticing that their eyes are kind of gazing in one direction. And I found, and I've been trained, that if you just follow that gaze and let people talk, they come up with some of the deepest hurts, feelings, traumas that have happened to them. And so again, I'm following them and just helping it come out, but they're leading the way. And also part of it is that, you know, we get hurt at different ages. We carry, it's almost like, I mean, the most extreme state is dissociative disorder, where people actually, their parts don't know each other.
Right.
But we all have parts, we all have ego states.
Yes.
And so sometimes it's important to know it is important to know what happened to people at different ages, so that when you go to process it, you've actually protected like the 3-year-old and the 5-year-old and the 10-year-old, and call it resourcing, so that when you actually deal with the trauma directly, these parts of the person are well protected and they're not getting hurt and traumatized. You. Tell me about your work with veterans.
I've done a lot of work with vets. I worked for a number of years at one of the vet centers here in the Bay Area, working exclusively with veterans and vets issues. I've worked with, the oldest veteran I worked with was a Korean War paratrooper. Worked with a lot of, have worked with a lot of Vietnam vets, Persian Gulf, Gulf War #1 vets, and OEF, OAF, Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom veterans. And my experience is that the issues of veterans has been different in some ways with each kind of combat era that they've been a part of. And some of the commonalities around the issues are, once again, this sometimes tendency to kind of get caught in the traumatic experiences that come up, for instance, around being a combat vet, not being able to process those completely, and then having that trauma impact not just the veteran, but veteran's spouse, partner, children, mothers and fathers. You know, as we both know, trauma extends well beyond the particular person to the family and social unit.
Well, I know that you know, there's been a way of trying to hide how much trauma any of our soldiers experience. Yeah. And that it's had different names over time, shell shock, and and they think it's just a small group of people when it's a lot larger.
It's a large group of people. My experience has been that almost everyone who's gone through combat has been in some way significantly impacted by that experience in ways that people closest to the veteran can't necessarily access or understand. And then the other thing that I want to mention is the whole issue of don't ask, don't tell. I've worked with a lot of LGBT veterans, non-combat and combat, and I've seen a lot of the impact of homophobia on gay vets, and have done a lot of work both in support groups and one-on-one with LGBT vets around healing from don't ask, don't tell, and that's another important piece of the work that I bring to Golden Gate Counseling.
I think I wanted to go back a little bit to one thing that I think is important for people to realize. everyone to realize that people going to this current war in Iraq, we have so much better protective gear around them, that a lot of these people go through horrendous experience that, in other words, they would have died.
Right.
And so they're actually living through traumas that are much more intense than vets in the past.
And along those lines, a lot of veterans go through explosions that would have killed people in past wars and end up with traumatic brain injuries that then not only have profound impacts on people physically, but also psychologically.
Yeah.
So thanks for asking that question.
Yeah.
Look forward to working with that practice. Talk with us about cultural trauma.
Well, it has a little bit to do with what you were talking about with your experience with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, with LGBT veterans, but very few people really understand, especially in our field, that the moment someone walks in the door, we tend to treat them as an individual, and forget that forget that we're dealing with racism, sexism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, just as the air we breathe. And so if we forget that this person has just experienced being marginalized or discriminated against their whole life, and this is a trauma that is unspoken often, and the victim often gets blamed. Oh, there's no racism left in the culture, or that was in the past. And the hypervigilancy, that someone who's been a marginalized group walks down the street constantly waiting to be demeaned, or waiting to be attacked. That the average, I would say, male doesn't have to deal, that a female isn't safe at night. She doesn't know when she's going to be raped. A man just takes it for granted.
Right.
So when someone comes in my office, I want to make a bigger picture for them, because just by being who they are, they've been traumatized.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by cultural trauma.
And then what about original trauma?
Well, we don't think about it, but just being born is trauma. How do you mean? It's a traumatic experience both for the mother and the child that come out of the womb.
Yeah. And
if the mother's in so much pain, obviously a child is experiencing that. And then there's the experience of separation. And where every single person has the experience of their parent not being able to be there when they need them. Think about, as good as a parent wants to be, they can't be there every time that the child gets hungry. Well, what happens to a child when they're hungry and the parent's not there?
And then there's a delay in response, even with the best
parents, there's a fear of death. Right from that moment, without food, you're going to die.
Yeah.
So we're all dealing with those issues, and we don't. Once we can put it into words, we can talk about it. But then again, there's all the time when we don't have any memories, but they all show up in the body.
Right. So it's kind of like there's individual trauma that every human being experiences and goes through, and then there are these very important cultural overlays of trauma